At the age of 100, you've seen and heard about everything. There is so much stress and hate in the world today. The only person you hurt when you hate is yourself. One of the things I've learned, the constructive management of stress. And I think that's part and parcel of why I managed to live so long.
When you meet Bill, it is like meeting a sage. It is like meeting a timeless sage who has overcome all his adversity to show you, how to live despite so many darts that life throws at you.
Bill Coors is my father. In the greater world, Bill Coors is an accomplished businessman, captain of industry. He helped bring Coors Brewing Company from a very humble and fragile time to, become one of the leading brewers in the world today.
How has he inspired me? Just being Bill inspires me, and his will to live has inspired me.
He was always such an extraordinarily wonderful mentor for me. He was a man of the most credible integrity. When he spoke, you could trust in what he had to say. The bottom line is, I think we have the kind of relationships with our employees and with the community today because of Bill Coors' leadership.
My assignment here, Don asked me to talk to you about leadership. It's really something that you almost have to feel. It's just a matter of empathy. It's a matter of compassion. It's a matter of being nice. How many of the people that we work with are lonely? How many of them don't like themselves very well for one reason or another? How many of them are stressed out of their gourd? Problems at home, financial problems, maybe problems in the workplace. That's all they need. Arm around the shoulder.
We're born with a will to live, and what robs us of that? And I think Bill's story is a wonderful, detailed travelogue about what you can do to reignite your spirit and recharge that will to live.
Many people might think they want to be a Titan brewer like Bill Coors. They would look at the history of the brewery and judge him, but they don't know the compelling story of what made him become the man he is today.
I was the last speaker of about 20. It included Nobel Prize winners, Oscar winners, successful businessmen. We all were supposed to give a 20-minute address to about 300 high school seniors headed for college. Spent a sleepless night wondering what I could possibly do. All of a sudden it occurred to me what nobody had done. I'd heard all of the speeches. I know they didn't want anybody preaching to them. I came up with the 11th commandment. honor thyself.
Great pleasure to be here with all of you. And it's a tremendous challenge because wow. I'm not sure that I really perceive my role. I presume it is to talk about success. And I'm not there yet. Probably the most important thing that all of you must achieve if you're going to achieve success is what I refer to as the 11th commandment. Thou shalt love thyself.
The speech that my dad delivered at the American Academy of Achievement is, I think, every bit as relevant today as it was 50 years ago. And I think the message is deeply moving, and it resonates with me, and I believe it would resonate with anyone who, struggles with the types of issues that he did.
Suicide is the second leading cause of death among teenagers after traffic accidents. The CDC says about 4,600 young lives are lost to suicide each year.
It's this feeling of being completely trapped in your own body.
You literally feel like you were losing your mind.
I don't know, it's sort of like a weird funk.
I had my first panic attack when I was 13.
I first tried to end my life when I was 11 years old.
I didn't know what other way of escaping this other than to die.
And part of romantic love is all kinds of things to all kinds of people. The poets write about it, the composers compose about it, the artists paint about it. I would like to give my definition of love to all of you.
I think love is pivotal. And I think Bill came to that same conclusion in his 1981 address. Unconditional love is life's most powerful healer. And I think if we can understand that love is acknowledgement and acceptance, appreciation, it's sort of the embrace that we give to others or ourselves that is reinforcing, reaffirming, and life-giving.
I was raised in a small 5-room cottage. The whole yard was just full of gorgeous flowers and shrubbery. It was a cozy little place. I loved it. My mother was an avid gardener. My father was a very strict disciplinarian. We did things his way, period.
I don't really have a good relationship with my family to begin with, so we don't really talk a lot.
Both my parents, they have split opinions on mental health, really. My mum's a lot more stern with it. She doesn't really believe in it. She doesn't really believe in depression or anxiety. With my mum, she doesn't really sympathise with me. She doesn't really understand it.
I think we struggle with these problems throughout time. And so I think the idea of having a distant father or maybe an over-involved or controlling mother or whatever it is, I mean, these are common patterns that we have to overcome. And so I think anything in terms of sharing Bill's message to get it out there to the greater world, it's going to help people here and now today dealing with these same issues.
I'm becoming aware of what's wrong with the world. Of all the people in the world, the only one that you can't lie to you can't cheat is the image that looks back at you when you look yourself in the mirror.
I never thought I was pretty enough. I never thought I was skinny enough. I never thought I was fit enough. Never thought I was smart enough. I never thought I was good enough. I was always second best. I never had the self-confidence.
I got diagnosed with anxiety when I last went to the doctors. And I also got diagnosed with OCD because eventually the anxiety led to a lot of eating relating problems as well.
I was diagnosed last year, my junior year of high school, with clinical depression and severe anxiety disorder. I was bullied a lot, and it took a lot out of me. I never told.
And I was a miserable little kid. I was well coated with baby fat. I had all kinds of complexes. I didn't like myself. And I couldn't see that anybody else would like me either. And I'm sure that many of us in this room have gone through those same feelings. I am where I am, probably because I was very intelligent in the choice of grandfathers.
Well, like so many immigrants, Adolf came here seeking an opportunity for a new life where if you worked hard and took some chances, perhaps, and did what you needed to do, that you could succeed in this land.
Sort of a reverence for my grandfather when you figure that he stowed away on a boat bound for Baltimore, out of Germany as an orphan. Just attracted to this great magnet, the United States of America, the land of freedom, the land of opportunity.
There is another thing that most of us probably haven't thought about. That's this very strong instinctive desire in all of us to possess, to own. There isn't one of us in this room wouldn't like to have something that we don't have. And that's one of the great motivations in a capitalistic, materialistic society such as we have, that we tend to equate success with the amount of money we make. I can assure you from personal experience it hasn't got a damn thing to do with it. Some of the most miserable people I know are the wealthiest people that I know.
Bill's speech in 1981 was pivotal because here's a time where businessmen were focused on productivity, money, profit margins, and return on investment. And Bill was talking to these young people and giving them an address to set them forth on their careers, saying, listen to your heart, follow your soul, do good work for yourself and other people, but don't focus on money. Money is a nice thing, but it's not the central thing.
Adolf Coors was only 21 years old when he came to Denver. After being orphaned at age 15, he already knew the meaning of working for a living. So when he came to Colorado, Coors did what he knew best. In 1873, he bought a partnership in a bottling business and converted an old tannery in Golden to this brewery plant, producing beer that was an instant success. Later, Coors bought out his partner, and by age 33, Coors was sole owner of his own business, a lifetime dream that would continue as a family tradition.
By the time Prohibition shut him down in 1914, my grandfather was in frail, failing health. I think he was discouraged. He was worth well over $1 million. When beer came back, my grandfather had passed on. He was having, I think, a chronic problem with the flu. So he, with his daughters and my grandmother, went to a hotel in Virginia Beach. While there, he managed to fall from the 6th floor and killed himself. He left a detailed note on how to pay the hotel bill. which would indicate some premonition of suicide. Of course, the family assumed it was accidental.
My aunt, who I unfortunately never met, she took her life before I was born. But she struggled with depression, obviously. And so we have a lot of that in my family, especially on my mom's side. So growing up, I was very aware of depression and that, you know, I might also have it. And as I've grown up, I've learned that I do.
Now I know that I had it at a very young age. I believe that I was 11 when I first experienced anxiety, but I didn't quite realize I had it until about 13, 14. It feels like there's this big knot in the pit of your stomach. It's really difficult to explain.
What stress does is it puts us in a state of war with ourselves, both our body and mind. So when you're stressed, when you're unhappy, you're not just unhappy as a person, your tissues and organs are unhappy, your cells are unhappy, and even your genes are unhappy. And that's how stress gets under our skin and actually impacts our entire being.
Friendships often give stability and meaning to life itself. It's not only family, but it's friends and colleagues, which make life easier, and although often stressful, it's a way that I think we could help each other.
My dad is very much a what you see is what you get person. He has very few people that have met him that don't consider him a friend. And that's very genuine. That's very much how he is and who he is.
Bill is one of the people who helped keep me alive during a very difficult phase in my life. But the other aspect of it was simply having a good friend I could reach out to once in a while and talk and know he'd understand what I was going through.
Bill Coors has been very, very, very good to me. We have built a relationship. When I got a divorce, he was there. When my mother died, he was there. When my father died, he was there for me. Bill Coors and I were not just owner and an employee. We could go anywhere in this country and not find an owner, chairman of the board, that has a relationship that you and Bill does. That's unheard of.
I realized I was gay in college in my freshman year and was absolutely terrified. Realizing that I was in, kind of heir apparent in a, very macho business of beer, where gay at that time was seen as, very non-masculine and really a threat to the business. I was really terrified of what impact that being public knowledge would have. But I also knew that if anybody would be able to deal with it, it would be my dad. And so he was the first one I told. And we were driving to Aspen for Thanksgiving, and he was driving, and I was probably 22 at the time, so it was about 4 years that I'd had to ponder this. And I finally, amidst tears and everything else, came out to him. And his response, here I am thinking, well, we're either going to careen off the side of the road or this is just going to be fine. Because here he is, a 75-year-old man hearing this news. And his response was, well, why are you crying? 10% of the world's gay. That was very amazing for me to have that level of support.
Having graduated from 8th grade, my father decided it was time for me to get a more elegant education. My father was a very rigid, inflexible person. He had his own set of beliefs. You couldn't get him away from them.
And any time I disagreed with him, his retort to me was, Bill, he said, if you would just think about this thing as long as I've thought about it, you'd come to my conclusion, you see. So no, any time that I disagreed with him, I just hadn't thought anything through.
Exeter was probably one of the top college preparatory schools in existence. So I'm down at the Union Station in Denver, leaving for a 2-day train ride to Exeter. My father is down there seeing me off. He shook my hand. He said, "Now don't get tattooed." The only bit of advice he had for me.
And I can remember when I was not quite as old as you were, I was in a total state of rebellion. Rebellion against this, you might say, planned destiny of mine. My father sent me to boarding school at the ripe old age of 13. And I can remember some of the experiences there. Some of the great people that I met there that began to shape me up. One in particular I would like to share with you. I found myself, for some reason, in an advanced Latin class way in over my head. And I can remember one day particularly in that class when the teacher, a man by the name of Norman Hatch, and he looked at me because I wasn't properly prepared and I'd messed up my assignment. And he looked at me and he says, "Coors, you are a crow among swans."
His reputation on the campus, whatever you do, don't get yourself into Norman Hatch's classes. And there I was in Norman Hatch's classes. Mr. Hatch had to have a whipping boy. I was the crow among swans. He was pretty rough on that crow.
We as human beings don't technically need friendship to survive. We don't. But without it, life would be pretty dull, and a lot of us would go crazy. Unfortunately, in today's society, finding a true friend is like finding a needle in a haystack.
Someone who was very extremely close to me would also pick on me as well in front of her friends. But when we were together, she would act like she was like my best friend and we were super close. But in front of everyone else, I was just something to make fun of.
But it's like you're in a circle of friends that you know love and care for you and can relate to you. But at the same time, you are suffering with 10 times more hate with the world and other people. You get more insecure. You have less understanding of who you want to be. It's a trap.
I was in a sad mood in class that day. I had been cultivating a friend and had been told to get lost, which crushed me. And I felt this thing start. Amazing. It was a feeling that started my feet, came up my legs, just a wave of grief. And I got up there, and I just broke out sobbing out loud, crying. I couldn't stop. I was terribly ashamed.
When the class was over, I was discouraged, depressed. I can remember walking down the street from the classroom with all kinds of thoughts of running away. And at one time in our lives, we all have these thoughts. Give up, quit.
And I remember walking down a gravel path. I heard somebody coming down the path behind me. I felt his arm go around my shoulder and hold me tight. It was Mr. Hatch. He said, "Let's go into the grill and have a cup of tea." So we went in. He couldn't have been nicer. He was the best teacher I ever came across. He taught me compassion, that people can be alone, people can be miserable, and they need a friend. I have carried that lesson all of my life.
Here you had, or I had, the arm of friendship being extended to an incredibly lonely, miserable little kid.
We all come with the gratitude and compassion software installed within us. It is just a matter of activating it. So somebody like Bill, who I know very well, is instinctively compassionate. He activated his compassion software.
Just an arm around someone, a word of support from someone that you can give to another person, not only does it help them, but it also helps you and helps to recharge your own spirit.
But that had a magical effect on me. If I did nothing else, I made myself the best Latin student in the school, and I cracked what was then called the College Board with one of the highest grades in the country, simply out of my respect for a man, as I say, extended an arm of friendship to me.
Mr. Hatch took a sincere interest in Bill. It was the first time anyone ever asked Bill about his life, the personal side of his life, what his interests were, what his hobbies were, and that changed him forever. He wanted to be that kind of mentor to others.
I had great trouble making friends. However, there were a few boys that for some reason, befriended me. One of these was John Ferguson. I admired John. He rode on the crew. At that point, because of a bicycle accident, I had been forbidden to do any contact sports whatsoever. However, at Exeter, you had to go out for some athletics. So, taking a cue from John Ferguson, I went out for crew. In 3 years, managed to get myself on the varsity, much to my amazement. I was awarded a major letter, which was a big E on my sweater, and I was so proud of it. It wasn't considered proper to wear it around campus. That was showing off. It's frowned on. But I had my letter.
So regardless of how you all perceive me, I do not perceive myself as successful. Furthermore, if you were hoping that I might recommend to some of you a career in the brewing industry, and that I might outline to you the pathways of getting to be a captain of the brewing industry, I'd say forget it. I didn't choose it. It was chosen for me, and that's one thing I want to talk about, and what I want to stress this morning to all of you. Do your own thing. Don't you let anybody interfere with that thing. Because your happiness, your contentment, your progress in our society is going to come from doing your own thing.
When I was in college, I had 2 semesters left in school, and I just felt like I did not know what I was going to do with my life. I didn't know if what I was going to college for is what I wanted to do when I graduated. And at that point, it's like you're supposed to be ready, like, okay, I'm going to conquer the world. And that's not how I felt at all. I felt confused. I felt lost.
But what you should know about my generation, particularly if you were a member of what is called a patriotic system, you didn't ask any questions. You did what you were told. And I was told what I was to study in school. And I was told that I was to train myself to become a business executive, to take my so-called rightful place in the management of my company.
Having a father who is sort of cold and distant is not an uncommon problem. I see it in my practice all the time. And I think what Bill experienced was a hunger for the appreciation from other people, maybe a low sense of his own value in life. And he had to find ways to shift that by becoming a successful student, by becoming a successful athlete, by becoming a successful businessman. It helped him to move beyond that sort of lack. But there was often a deep need for appreciation, affection, acknowledgement from others, which is a natural human phenomena, but we often ignore it.
Determine for yourself what you want to be. And then, whether or not you make it depends upon what you yourselves are. And you are listening this morning to a guy who knows what he's talking about, because, believe it or not, I was never permitted to do my own thing. My mother wanted me to be a concert pianist. And believe it or not, I had a certain talent for that. I still have, as a matter of fact. So I'm a frustrated pianist. My father wanted me to be a chemical engineer. I wanted to be a doctor. And guess who won?
I had graduated from Princeton University with an advanced degree in chemical engineering. Princeton has a glorious campus. I was there by happenstance. I was actually entered into the Coors family alma mater, which is Cornell University. In my senior year at Exeter, a delegation from my father's fraternity and my brother's fraternity wanted to get me there before I even got there. Something rebelled in me. They were very, very class distinctive. I didn't like the fact that I couldn't pal around with somebody who wasn't approved by my fraternity members. My roommate said to me, "Come on down to Plainfield with me, and we'll go to Princeton, see if we can get you in." And they took me in. Freshman crew was a competitive sport. We rowed against Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and a few more. Because I had been on the Exeter crew, I knew the ropes. So it was easy to place myself on the freshman crew. Senior year, my third year, and final year, I rowed on the varsity. It was a great experience for me.
So when I was looking at colleges and trying to figure out where to go, I had Princeton in the back of my mind, obviously, because my father had gone there. And but I've always been more of a West Coast sort of guy. And I went to visit Stanford and fell in love with it, fell in love with the campus. And he saw that. And he never put any pressure on me to follow where he went. His directive was, go where you're going to be happy and go where you're going to learn. And so he was great at guiding me through that process.
Albert Einstein was a common sight on the Princeton campus. It was a thrill to bump elbows with a man like Einstein. He was working in their mathematics department as a faculty member, and you would see him walking back and forth from his home. When you met him on the walkway, you didn't impede him. I always said hello, shake his hand. He was a very cordial, very warm person, but his mind was in the clouds. That was obvious.
It followed from the special theory of relativity that mass and energy are both but different manifestations of the same thing, a somewhat unfamiliar conception for the average mind.
He would sometimes stop a student, ask him where he was going. Am I coming from lunch or am I going to lunch? He was out of it. He just didn't know. He really didn't care.
I would say that the most important characteristic that any successful person must develop, that is character. And this has set up all kinds of internal conflicts in me.
Bill was a good student. He and I were both asked to join the DuPont company. And Bill actually thought about it for a little while, but it didn't make sense when I'm sure his father said, "You're coming to run this company."
Jobs were very hard to get when I graduated. $100 a month with average salary. Of course, I had a bit of a guilt complex. I was expected back in Golden to work at the family company. I just wanted to see if I could prove myself without a cushy family job. At graduation, my father graced me by attending. I realized then he was very, very thin, very tired. I didn't have the heart to tell him that I wasn't going back to Golden. So I failed to report for DuPont. They're still probably wondering what happened to me.
Believing and standing for something. Taking responsibility for yourselves. And doing your thing because you want to do that thing. And not because somebody else wants you to do it.
So when I got back to Golden, I went into my father's office. He said, "Bill, I want you to go over to the pottery and do something about those losses. But you are not to change a thing." All I could think about, God, talk about mission impossible. So I went over there. I had no desk, no telephone, no authority, and felt like a damn fool walking around all day long. Well, my father, he had his own set of beliefs. You couldn't get him away from them. He didn't accept the fact that things could change. All I was trying to do was to anticipate change and getting ready for it. The only standard I had was getting approval from my father, which I never got.
So I think sometimes I find myself very anxious, just trying to figure out how to get through it and get through and find air and find ways to be happy again. So I think sometimes my heart's racing, sometimes it's affecting my eating habits, sometimes I don't have a haircut. It varies.
So I feel like some people think that, or they could be very happy and have it all put together, but I think a lot of people put on maybe a front that everything's going well, and maybe it's a pride thing that they don't want to talk about something that isn't going well. So that was definitely a thing for me.
So stress is your struggle with what is, what was or what might be. Stress is not liking what you have or not having what you like. And so stress also affects us socially. It impacts our relationships. We become irritable. We don't tolerate others very well. We don't accept others very well. We become judgmental. And finally, stress impacts us occupationally. It decreases our work capacity. It produces executive burnout. It makes us disengaged. And to talk about Bill being disengaged is almost like this is Bill and this is disengagement.
We were the principal source of chemicals and scientific porcelain on which every laboratory, every high school chemical lab was dependent upon. Half of everything we started making ended up on the dump. Obviously, there had to be some changes made to correct that problem. And we had one competitor, which is a Champion spark plug. My father had arranged to buy Champion's spark plug business. Part of the purchase enabled us to license ourselves to a very secret and very exclusive process for forming ceramic insulators. We had nobody capable of setting up a shop to manufacture those insulators. So I took on the task. In a few days, I was having the time of my life, actually doing something constructive.
America has been attacked without warning. That's the dramatic, the almost fantastic news that Presidential Secretary Early tells the press. And throughout the nation, the news is flashed. It's war. American lives lost. American property destroyed. With growing resentment, Americans learn of the treacherous assault. We didn't start this war, but we can finish it.
American physics was at a turning point. American science had an inclination toward big equipment and experiment. Since 1900, agencies had been plowing millions into a dozen elite institutions. Now, out of this funding of best science, as it was called, Americans were emerging in the vanguard of world physics. In Washington, there was increasing concern for secrecy. America clashed with the Soviet Union over Eastern Europe. There was espionage, rumors of espionage. The House Un-American Activities Committee investigated American loyalties.
One day, the front office receptionist said I had an urgent phone call. A man on the phone introduced himself with the Lawrence Radiation Laboratory in Berkeley, California. He said, "We need insulators. We need them in a hurry." We had absolutely no inclination of what they were doing with our insulators.
The Manhattan Project started in 1942 here in Oak Ridge, and for the years ensuing during World War II, it was maintained a secret, primarily because General Groves compartmentalized everything, so people didn't really know what they were doing. 22,000 people, maybe 100 of them would have known what they were working with. My understanding is that Bill Coors was asked to create an insulator, and I believe he did make all of the insulators that were used in the Calutrons at Y12.
It was common knowledge among the top physicists in the world that the atom bomb was a possibility. There's evidence that Germany was working on them, and Russia was working on it, and even Japan was working on it.
Albert Einstein was convinced by Leo Szilard to sign a letter that had been prepared indicating the concern for uranium and that it might be made into a bomb. That's why President Roosevelt determined to look into that uranium situation, and that's where the Manhattan Project actually got its start.
All of a sudden, we had our hands full. We had the only facility was capable of manufacturing satisfactory insulators. We didn't know what we were doing until we dropped that bomb on Hiroshima. Then the whole world knew.
The news of final surrender, the news that peace had at last been won, penetrated to every corner of the globe. Peace, the hope of mankind, had arrived. In every corner of the battered world, men rejoiced, cheered the end of World War II.
Mr. Coors, we really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and visit with you here in your lovely home. And we wanted to officially recognize your contributions to the Manhattan Project. It says, William Kistler, Bill Coors, in recognition of your historic role in providing critical insulators to the Manhattan Engineer District during World War II. Your unhesitating commitment to provide and innovate insulators to be used in the Y12 Calutrons demonstrated your patriotism and America's can-do spirit. The Calutrons were subsequently used for a variety of groundbreaking scientific and technical achievements, including the separation of the first stable isotopes as well as the initial development of materials science and nuclear medicine. For your enthusiastic willingness to go above and beyond the call of duty, you are awarded the Secretary of Energy's Appreciation Award.
Very honored.
This is a picture of when Bill Coors was the recipient of the Patriots Award. The Patriots Award is given to an outstanding American for what he has contributed to the United States. So I went to Mr. Coors and I said, Bill, I said, there's something I want to do. And I says, there's this Patriots Award. And he says, yeah. And I says, I want to nominate you for that. He looked at me and I think he thought I was crazy. Something that I always wanted to do for Mr. Coors for all he has done for me. And it was very, very important to me that I give him something that he couldn't buy, he had to earn, and he earned receiving the Patriots Award.
That you get up in the morning because you want to get up in the morning, that you study because you want to study, that you have established moral and ethical values for yourself that you believe in, then you have character. And do your own thing.
Then it didn't matter so much to me, like that I was supposed to become a lawyer or supposed to do a certain thing, and I just focused on what's most important to me because I'm still gonna have to live with my own decisions, and that's what matters the most, like yourself and like what you think of yourself and how you're going to make your own choices and decisions in life.
And this is something that all of us have to cope with virtually all of our lives. It's probably the biggest single problem that a sophisticated society has to deal with. In other words, if you fall in love with a young man or a young lady, and you can distinguish between your various feelings, you may be hurt because they don't love you. You may be frustrated because you cannot possess them. But you will still love them and not hate them.
I don't believe that many people actually understand what real love is. I think people confuse love a lot of the time with infatuation. So the idea that you're in love with the idea of love, basically, the idea that you would do anything for one particular person. It's quite dangerous, really. It just baffles your mind.
I finally just opened up to somebody, and now I'm closed right back up again. And I don't think I'm gonna open up for a while.
For me, letting go of the guilt of a failed relationship, and it was made to make me feel like it was my fault. And like I had did something wrong, like I wasn't good enough, like I wasn't good enough of a person. And I had to let go of feeling guilty for that.
I started to shut people out and shut really good people out who I shouldn't have shut out. And then I lost them because I was afraid.
Love is something that goes out from you and asks nothing in return. And most of it involves this rather agonizing experience that many of us go through, particularly when we are young, which you might refer to as romantic love. Romantic love really has very little to do with love. And if you will take this romantic love and separate it into the various emotions, and if you understand thoroughly each one of those emotions so that you can cope with them separately, you will be able to understand love.
I think the ability to communicate effectively is a core human coping mechanism. And so I think perhaps Bill in his journey was handicapped because his family didn't role model that. His family was not communicative, warm, emotional, engaging in that way. They were productive and work-oriented, and that's how they defined themselves. But I think For people that can find a way to connect with other people, it helps to work through the problems and struggles that you're having without having to resort to drinking or sexual acting out or avoidance or depression as a way to cope with pain and struggle. And so I think we can deal with that in relationship and community and connection, and that's much more productive.
He wanted a family. He wanted to be a family man, but he really didn't know how to be that family man. He wanted to prove himself even to his wife and children, and became a workaholic, just like the generations had done before him. When he married the first time, he didn't know Jerry very long, and he didn't know the intimate details of her life and how wounded she was due to her own childhood. They had 5 children. The first was Missy, the second was Billy, William Kistler Coors Jr., Maggie, May, and the 5th was a stillborn baby that came at the 9th month of pregnancy.
My first wife was a lovely girl from Garden City, Long Island. My second child was a boy. I was excited and thrilled. He was my namesake, my junior. I was very, very proud of him. He managed to choke to death without warning.
When he lost his son at age 20 months, when William Kistler Coors choked to death, Bill said that was the first time he'd ever had to face such trauma in his life. And he held it in. He never talked about it to anyone. He just internalized it, and it festered.
So I kept myself partially inebriated, so finally I could live with the fact that he was gone. My wife, Geraldine, at that time, was a heavy drinker. Losing her son and the impact it had on me didn't help her with her alcohol problems.
When Bill talks about love, this is a concept that meant so much to him because love was withheld from him when he was a child. But he was hungry for love. And when he married for love. And he did not want that marriage to disintegrate. He wanted to be a dad. He wanted to be a husband. He didn't really have the tools to do it, and he realized that in his first marriage. And because he was a workaholic, he wanted to make it different in his second marriage and with his son, Scott.
My bond with my father, I think, was unique due to several circumstances in his life. He had had a difficult relationship prior, and the loss of his first son, who was really the apple of his eye, I think really changed his outlook on the world in general.
The second tragedy in my family was a kidnap attempt ending in the murder of my older brother, Adolf.
On February 9th, 1960, Adolf Coors III was kidnapped. In September, they found remains of Ad's body in the Sedalia, Colorado dump. And the family just went into obscurity. Nobody talked about it to each other. They didn't talk about the woundedness, and Bill suffered for that. One day he realized, I don't have the will to live.
It was quite a loss. It traumatized the whole family. I don't think we understood just how to handle it. I know I didn't. My oldest child, we called her Missy. She suffered from bipolar, married a very fine guy, a member of the Guggenheim family, had 2 children from him, was under psychiatric care for her depression, managed to get out a window. I think it was a 9th floor.
When Bill lost his brother, his spouse, his son, his daughter, He lost the will to live. What mattered to him the most was not there anymore. There was a vacuum in his life.
It is a huge problem. Like, there's a lot of suicides all over the nation, and they especially happen in clusters. So I think it's super important to talk about it. I think a lot of people shy away from talking about it because it's this taboo subject.
I mean, I know people that have gone way, way, way south because they couldn't handle the pressures. And it's a sad, but it's an honest thing. I think those are conversations that need to be had because oftentimes we don't think that our struggles matter to anybody else.
With everything that happened in my life, I began to fail. Became non-functional. Wasn't sleeping, had no appetite.
When Bill really began to feel his stress, he never looked at the cause of it. He never reflected on his past. He was born in an era when children were to be seen and not heard. His mother and his grandfather kept a log of what Ad, Joe, and Bill did wrong throughout the week, and on Sunday they were severely punished by their father. They never had a cohesive family. They never had a nurturing environment, but Bill never reflected on that. He just pushed it down.
My father sensed that something was wrong, so he sent me to Mayo Clinic. To him, the medical sun rose and set on that clinic. They examined everything about me that they could examine. When all the testing was over, an intern greeted me in his office with a hello. I have good news, and I've got bad news for you. We can't find one single thing wrong with you. Physically, you're in perfect health. Now for the bad news. We haven't the slightest idea how to help you. That he was amazed how many young men in situations just like mine, with the same complaints, had come to them for whom they had no answer.
So depression can range from mild things where someone is grieving the loss of a job, the loss of a girlfriend or boyfriend, or loss of a parent, and it can range to things where it's a significant reaction to a major life event like a divorce that is devastating, to a biological illness that totally incapacitates someone where they're not sleeping, eating, or able to get out of bed or function in any way, and all they think about is suicide. So what I see is this full spectrum of depression where we have sort of mild signs and symptoms to this most severe and devastating signs and symptoms.
Now, if you go back 50 years ago, we had this biomedical model when everything was about biology. And so people were looking at medical conditions as driven just by molecules and cells and tissues. Now what we follow is the biopsychosocial-spiritual model, where illness is not just biological, but if I'm lonely, it's going to creep under my skin and increase my risk of heart attack. If I'm depressed, it might increase hardening of my arteries. So that is what Bill suffered from. He suffered from the biological challenges that were driven by psychological and social and spiritual aspects of life. And now if Bill was to access medical care, they will look at him holistically.
And I think it takes significant stress, it takes loss, it takes turmoil, it takes abuse, it takes significant events to decay that will to live. And I think once that's been decayed, it's often a challenge to reignite it and find it back.
I think the reason that my father pulled through a very difficult time in his life and maintained the will to live even when he may not have had it, I think he felt a responsibility to his family. He felt a responsibility to the company to provide leadership. I think after his brother's death, he was next in line, and he embraced that responsibility, and I think he felt that he couldn't give up, and that's why he pursued other alternative ways of trying to figure out how to deal with it and how to get the will to live back.
When he lost his will to live, and Mayo said, the good news is we don't know what's wrong with you. The bad news is we don't know what's wrong with you. And he wanted to start investigating what he called the unorthodox world of medicine. From there, he went into meditation, diet, and exercise.
I think I've gotten a lot better at handling stress. I think, like, over the past few years, I've learned how to deal with stress a lot better than I have in the past. Like, I take on stress in a physical form, as does my mom, so I think it's kind of a genetic thing. Like, I literally grew a tumor in my neck from bacteria, which sounds really gross, but I've learned since then how to not let it manifest itself to that point. And I've gone to therapy for that, especially this last spring semester. So I would say I'm still stressed out a lot, but now I know how to manage it more.
I don't think burying it helps, because when you bury a seed, what does it do? It grows. So even if you turn a blind eye to it today, who knows that it won't manifest itself tomorrow.
The main way of dealing with it is to not think about it at once, because like thinking about the immense amount of like data and like stuff you're supposed to be processing and doing right now that you should be doing, even though you like say want to eat a sandwich, it would just kill you.
Honestly, weed doesn't even help that much. Weed just makes you realize you don't have it together, and then you're just high and paranoid, so it doesn't really help.
Well, the responsibility I have to myself is the same responsibility that I would hope everybody has to their self, and that's to maintain myself in the absolute peak of both, which you might call mental and physical health. And I think that this is so important as far as everybody is concerned, that there's a dedication in me to do what I can in the way of education and encouragement to get other people to follow the same thing.
I think Bill going on this holistic expedition is so beneficial, because even at this time today, I have read so many books about different methods on how you can cope. So I think it's helped so many people, the fact that he's done that. Exercise is a natural antidepressant. It releases endorphins, which, of course, it's really helpful if you have anxiety.
He, through Dr. Herbert Benson, learned the relaxation response and meditates. To this very day, Bill meditates twice a day. He realized he didn't need to turn to alcohol. He didn't need to turn to prescriptive drugs. Bill took control of his will to live.
The first time I ever visited Bill in Denver at his home, he had a bottle of pills. They were vitamin pills that he was taking. I never heard of anybody taking vitamins. in those days. So he got it to jump on me. But anyway, I've taken my share since then.
He was always on to new things, from meditation to chelation to chiropractic was in its infancy when he really, latched on to that. And I thought it was great. I mean, I didn't know any different. I just knew him as a very forward thinker in that realm. And I can remember as a kid, he every morning would make this shake for me. It was absolutely awful. It was called Pep Up, and it was by Adele Davis, but it was very healthy for me, and it always gave me a great start to my day, and I always had a lot of energy and seemed to grow up pretty big and strong. So I think he did me a lot of favors from the very beginning.
Bill spent his life trying to figure out how he could improve his own personal health and also how he could help employees help themselves in improving their own lives. He always had something that he wanted us to try to make our lives better.
It looks like an expensive health club, the kind you'd pay hundreds of dollars a year to be a member. But this health club is absolutely free if you work for Coors or you're married to someone who works there. Coors opened its wellness center 6 months ago for the simple reason, says the company, to keep its employees healthy and happy.
Health care at that period was thought of only as health insurance. There was no insurance about it. It was just a way of paying people for being sick.
Corporate America took notice because that's when other industries started saying, how is Coors becoming so much more competitive? How are they keeping their people happy? How are they keeping them healthy? Because when you have 10,000 employees, you have a risk factor. There's heavy work that goes on up there, repetitive work, stressful work. This is not always an easy job. And when we started taking care of them once a week, we eliminated a majority of those problems. From Bill's standpoint, it wasn't even about the money, it was about the quality of life.
So it kind of stresses you out. I take it a little bit at a time, but things happen. Like right now I'm sick. I don't really know what I have. My throat's been killing me for about a week or two now, and I'm taking a lot of medicine.
His stress affects all the domains of our life. From a physical perspective, it accelerates our aging. We are actually physiologically older by 15 years if we are stressed. When stress becomes deeper, the symptoms become concerning. You might get chest pain, your blood pressure might go up, your memory might fail, right? You might explode when you shouldn't. And then there are the real alarming symptoms like heart attack, like stroke, like sometimes even predisposition towards cancer. So annoying symptoms, concerning symptoms, and alarming symptoms.
Bill's story is pivotal because it really clarifies the role that stress has in the development of illness, whether it's physical illness, mental illness, and often, in my view, the line between those two things is non-existent.
I think exercising, reading, listening to music. I picked up the guitar recently just to keep myself active and doing something. It's more of a melodic thing, a rhythmic thing that can get me through whatever I'm feeling.
I used to swim quite often as well, and that was really, that helped a lot with my anxiety because it was something where I could just go to, just zone out and just not think about anything else.
I had the responsibility of the health care of the Coors employees on my shoulder. I was aware the biggest obstacle to health in any group is stress. Management of stress is very possible and very practical.
That's what I usually do, is make a list of priorities, right? Like of everything I need to do, and then the priority listing of what order I should be doing them in. And then from there, I just take it like one step at a time, and that helps a lot. Because if you start to think about it all, which sometimes it kind of gets to you and you think about it all, and it really just damages your psyche.
So for exercise, you're accomplishing something. I think anytime that you can put yourself to a task of, I'm gonna run for 5 minutes, mentally, that builds you up. when you make it past your 5 minutes or whatever you set for yourself, or if it's push-ups, if it's reps, if it's anything, you're completing something early on in the day or later in your day where you go home with a win. I think the physical body is important, and that's one of the things about the mind, the body, and the spirit, is that if they're all working in alignment, you can find your way. You can be your own light at the end of the tunnel, basically.
I look at 3 foundational issues: sleep, exercise, and diet. And I think those are some of the best things we can do to help support people's ability to recharge their being. That's at the core of a lot of what Bill did that helped pull him out of the depths of despair.
One of the most significant things that Bill did was how we use what we call integrative and holistic healthcare. Everybody who was working on the side of physical medicine started to integrate and work together. We individually did those things that we specialized in most, and the winners were always the patients at the end of the day because they got exactly what they needed.
And if we are going to be successful, the most important thing we have to be able to do is to radiate relationship to people.
I think one of the most important things we can have in our life is a support system built of true, genuine friends that love you for you.
Communication is core to most human experience. So it's tough to have a good marriage without good communication skills. It's tough to be a good employee or a good boss without good communication skills. It's tough to be a good parent without good communication skills. My guess is that as Bill evolved in his life, he developed those skills so that by the time he gave his address in 1981, he actually was able to live that out and share his deep feelings effectively with a group of people.
I think the interesting thing about both Bill Coors and Joe Coors, my father, was that they always had an open door. If somebody wanted to come see them, many occasions when people would come and they'd heard some rumor or they'd heard some problem, and he'd say, well, come on, let's talk about it.
I felt from the beginning, from rumors I was hearing about Bill's feelings about wellness and lifestyle, that I had stumbled off into paradise coming from where I was coming from. It was interesting that on these quarterly leadership meetings, Bill never failed to mention wellness. It was always a point he made of it. Even though he was talking about company business, that had become part of the culture of Coors. And that to me said, that's the culture that Mr. Coors over time has created as a leader in the company.
As a person, I was very impressed with him because he was the type that, as Patty said, he would come through, he would say hello. He didn't treat you like an employee, he would treat everyone like a friend. And I was really impressed with that. That's probably the reason I stayed as long as I did.
When I first met Bill, he reminded me of my dad. And so it was kind of a family situation from there on, because when I first started Coors, I was just out of high school. There was a discussion that they wanted to get a mammography center started at Coors. And so there was 11 women that got together on like a panel or a group. And we worked to get the mammography center on premise at Coors. And at the time, I was working as the supervisor in accounts payable. So when they finally got the mammography center up and running, I decided that I would take my group of women, because there was 15 of us total, and we would be the first 15 people in the doors of the mammogram center, just so that, you know, we all got checked out. And so we go in there, and I get diagnosed with breast cancer. And I had surgery. Bill found out. And so then when we were in the conversation, or in the room talking to Bill. He had asked me how I was, and Bill told me that he had a nutritionist, and that if I was interested, that, you know, she could probably help me go through the process of wellness while I was going through the chemo as well. And I says, and I'm sure that every other woman in this company will appreciate it from this point forward. It was awesome. And I've got him to thank for it, because it's been 26 years for me, and I still, it may not be wood, but I'm cancer free, and it's on the account of him.
Bill was always looking for a better way to do everything, and he was a great student of not only brewing, but every aspect of the business.
He was a futuristic type of person. He saw things that many of us never had a dream to see.
He is recognized around the world as a genius, because every time you pick up an aluminum can, I hope you thank Bill, since he developed that aluminum can.
We were primarily a shipping brewery. There were 3 packages for your beer. There were the kegs, bottles, heavy glass bottles, and the tin-plated cans. The landscape was coated with them. I was looking for an alternative, and dumb luck came my way.
A unique aspect of our process is the fact that cans, after use, can be salvaged and also remelted.
Bill, in those years, was one of the first to say this has to stop, and that eventually led him to the discovery of how to create in a mass production way cans of beers, which had a major effect on the environment.
So the mystique of the product itself, it was amazing, the aluminum cans in 1959, that he would also give back to the community, the 1 cent at the time, so you could turn your can in. He started that whole concept, and we helped innovate the whole area of the give back, where we were taking the aluminum can and cleaning up. So we were way ahead of what people are talking about now in terms of environment.
I think his visionary nature and ability to see the future and understand that the brewery had to grow to survive really is the reason that company is there today.
If I were to ask what my main contribution to society has been, I would say it's been recycling.
I perceive success as a sense of total inner satisfaction with one's life, a sense that one has fully completed his or her obligation to this society of ours that leaves this world a better place than he or her found it.
The concept called Outward Bound was created to take the young people, expose them to the hazards, teach them how to cope with it. What it was, survival course. I had a few courses myself. Rock climbing had never appealed to me. I thought that should be relegated to mountain goats and idiots. And here I was, an idiot enjoying every minute of it. Got me out into the wilderness for the first time in my life, and I had a ball.
It's learning about yourself and how you work with others through the wilderness. And that's the vision that Bill had when he said, yes, I want to support this organization.
Outward Bound became a part of Bill's healing. Once he discovered the joy of being in nature, it changed his life. It touched his soul. I think it was the first time something ignited his soul with passion that wasn't brewery related, and it filled him, it fulfilled him.
I was on a authority-ordered relationship with an unofficial probation officer in the city and county of Denver. He ended up offering me a scholarship to Colorado Outward Bound School. And that's where I went. Going on this pathway brought me to the place in life where I was able to influence a lot of lives around me. And I've saved a lot of lives in my lifetime. And sometimes I wonder about, what effect those lives have had by my having been there for them.
Bill had the heart to establish Outward Bound, not for people to become high country adventurers, mountain climbers, and conquerors. He wanted people to overcome their fears and their phobias through going through a wilderness program. In the 1960s, when Bill established Outward Bound, civil unrest was happening in school. Desegregation was happening. Bill had Bob Caldwell, who was the principal of East High School, on the board of Outward Bound. And he went to Bob and said, I think we need to start a program for these gang members that are coming into our schools, that they need to either go through the Outward Bound program, put them in tents together, and they'll either kill each other or come out as friends. They came out as friends.
When you think about Outward Bound, you think about the outside, the wilderness and things of that sort. If I had not have had that opportunity, no telling which way I would have gone in life. I refer back to the solo, that sitting out there by yourself gives you the opportunity to reflect really deep down inside as to who you are, and what is your purpose here on this earth.
The reason why I came on this course was to find out what my limits are and how I can push them even further.
I'd rather this be my classroom, because you just get to come out and be in nature.
There's no textbooks. There's no writing. You listen and then you do.
The main takeaway is that I'm stronger than I think I am. And even though things seem like I'm going nowhere, I think that's like in life, you don't think you're going anywhere, but if you keep pushing yourself, you can eventually make it in life.
If you don't love and accept yourself, you're never truly going to be able to love or accept anyone else. You have to be happy with yourself and love yourself now.
I know that no matter what I'm going through, I have a bunch of people who are always rooting for me and who love me for me.
Whoever's watching this, I don't have to know what you look like. I know that regardless of anything, everyone is beautiful in their own way. And the amount of people on this planet, there is always someone that is going to find you absolutely gorgeous, regardless of what you feel about yourself. And it's just about finding that hope. You have to be true to yourself.
And love is primarily the fundamental relationship between people. And that kind of love can be extended not to one, two, but to hundreds and thousands of people.
And that's what I see when I meet Bill, that he has that wise acceptance of reality. He is in the moment, and he has accepted that he is getting older, which is a big deal because sometimes we just fight with the body not behaving how we want it to. So if you keep that curiosity of a child within you alive, if you learn from adversities and cultivate wisdom, that combination can help you grow no matter what. I believe if you're willing to learn, then no matter what the age, the best is yet to come. And that is actually what I feel when I meet Bill every time.
All living systems have the ability to heal themselves if we can get the barriers out of the way. And for Bill, the barrier was stress. And stress impacted his will to live. Once he was able to manage stress in his life through all the discoveries he found with holistic medicine, he was able to reignite that biological healing that took place in body, mind, and spirit, and he was able to recover fully.
Once Bill regained his will to live, he was so excited. He had to share that information with everyone, from his employees to the 1981 class of the American Academy of Achievement, and he's still doing that.
I make a real point of telling my dad I love him every time I see him. At his age, every day is a gift. I love his saying that he's skating on thin ice and it gets thinner every day. I like to think there's still lots of ice left. He always returns that I love you with an I love you, and that means a great deal to me. And I mean, the only thing I would say to him that I probably don't say every day directly is thank you for shaping me into a person that I'm proud of and instilling the right values in me to live a successful and happy life, because I really have. And you've laid the groundwork and provided the support to make that happen.
Where I live in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, there are eagles in the sky, golden eagles, beautiful creature, graceful, independent, really the king of the skies. They're symbolic to me of independence, total and complete reliance on themselves, incredible adaptation to nature. I've admired them, and I think I've emulated them to the degree that I have acted independently, not only for my good, but for the good of my whole family.
Probably the most important thing that all of you must achieve, if you are going to achieve success, thou shalt love thyself. These are the things we must perceive. And we must perceive ourselves as people. If God intended all of us to be Greek gods and Greek goddesses, he would have made all of us Greek gods and Greek goddesses, and God, how boring it would be. We have got to accept ourselves as we are. But there isn't one of us that cannot be spiritually beautiful. And that is what we must achieve.
age of 100, you've seen and heard about everything. I start out each day with a happy attitude. I do that by counting my blessings. How can you be so damn lucky? I have a theme song, Keep On Smiling, because when you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. When you're crying, you bring on the rain. So quit your crying, be happy again. Keep on smiling, keep on smiling. The whole world smiles with you.
I hope it's obvious to all of you that I love you. The only person in the world that you cannot cheat, that you cannot trick, that you cannot deceive, that you cannot lie to, is yourself. So be yourselves, do your thing, and you'll get there. I apologize for the sermon, but I couldn't resist. Thank you very much.
When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. When you're laughing, the sun comes shining through. When you're crying, you bring all the rain. So stop